On the most glamorous wedding day of the year, with cameras flashing and drums beating, the billionaire's elegant new wife raised her hand and slapped a pregnant maid in front of hundreds of guests. But the maid's calm reply left the entire hall frozen. What she said next would shatter the billionaire's empire forever. In the heart of Lagos, Nigeria, stood a mansion built like a palace. Gold-plated gates, marble floors, and crystal chandeliers made it clear. This was the home of wealth beyond measure. On that particular day, the mansion was alive with music. Drummers pounded rhythms that echoed through the streets. Women in colorful gele and men in sharp suits swayed, gossiping and laughing. It was the wedding of the year. The groom, Chief Adewale Bamidele, was no ordinary man. At just 42, he was one of Africa's richest billionaires, owner of oil blocks, luxury hotels, and private jets. He was admired, feared, and envied in equal measure. The newspapers called him the king of Lagos wealth. The bride, Tomowa, was 26. Beautiful, sharp-tongued, and raised in privilege, she was the daughter of a senator. Her face was flawless under layers of makeup, her dress imported from Paris, her diamonds heavy enough to bend her neck. She had waited for this day her whole life, a day that would place her above other women, a day that would crown her as queen in the world of the rich. But what no one knew was that beneath the glamour, envy and secrets simmered like a pot left too long on fire. Among the dozens of workers rushing about in the mansion was a young maid named Amara. She was 19, soft-spoken, and carrying a heavy burden, literally. Her belly was swollen with pregnancy, though she still tried to move with grace as she served food, carried trays, and obeyed every order. Amara was not like the other servants. While most kept their heads down, she had eyes that told stories. Eyes full of pain but also a strange kind of strength. She was an orphan from a small village in Enugu, hired by the Bamidele household months earlier. The other maids whispered about her. "She doesn't say much but she's always watching," one said. "And that pregnancy," another added, lowering her voice. "No one knows who the father is." That mystery was enough to keep the gossip alive. The ceremony itself was grand. Politicians, businessmen, and celebrities filled the front seats. A famous gospel choir sang praises that lifted the roof. Adewale, dressed in a royal agbada, stood tall, smiling with pride as his bride walked toward him. Tomowa's gown shimmered, and her father walked her down the aisle with the dignity of a king. But as the vows were exchanged, Amara was in the background, balancing a tray of champagne flutes. She had been warned countless times by the head maid. "Don't you dare make a mistake today. If you embarrass Madame Tomowa, you're finished." So Amara moved carefully, ignoring the ache in her back and the whispers about her swollen belly. By the time the reception began, the party was in full swing. Dancers twirled, drummers pounded, and laughter roared like thunder. Food and drinks flowed endlessly. And then it happened. Tomowa, now Mrs. Adewale Bamidele, stood in her glittering dress, surrounded by guests. She was basking in her moment of glory, when suddenly her sharp eyes caught Amara at the corner of the hall. The maid, exhausted and sweating, stumbled slightly while serving wine. A glass tipped, and though it didn't fall, a single drop of champagne splashed onto the hem of Tomowa's gown. It was a tiny mistake, barely noticeable. But Tomowa's pride was larger than the ocean. In an instant she spun around, her diamond earrings glinting under the lights, and her palm flew across Amara's face with a sound that silenced the entire hall. Gasps erupted. The music stopped. Even the drummers froze. Amara staggered back, one hand on her cheek, her eyes wide with shock. She hadn't expected it, though maybe she should have. "How dare you, you foolish girl? Do you know how much this dress costs? Do you know who I am?" The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Some guests avoided looking directly. Others whispered behind their fans and glasses. Chief Adewale stood frozen, his jaw tightening, but he said nothing. Amara lowered her eyes. For a moment, it seemed she would remain silent, like a typical servant. But then something in her shifted. Slowly, painfully, she straightened her back, her hand still on her swollen belly. When she finally looked up, her gaze locked with Tomowa's. And in that moment, something unexplainable passed between them. It was more than defiance. It was revelation. A few guests later claimed they saw Amara's lips curve into the faintest smile. Others swore they saw tears in her eyes. But one thing was certain: the young maid did not cower. Instead she spoke, her voice steady, calm, but carrying a weight that froze everyone. "Madam," Amara said, "you may slap me today, but one day you will bow before me and this child." The hall exploded. Women covered their mouths. Men muttered under their breath. Tomowa's face turned red with fury. "What nonsense is this?" she hissed. "Bow before you. A mere maid. Pregnant and shameless." But Amara's eyes did not waver. She touched her belly gently, protectively, and whispered words that only a few near her could hear. And those words were enough to make the bride stagger back in shock. Chief Adewale's face darkened. He moved quickly, pulling Tomowa aside, whispering harshly in her ear. But the damage was done. The guests had seen it all: the slap, the words, the tension. Rumors spread like wildfire among the tables. "Did you hear what she said? That the bride will bow to her one day. Who does that maid think she is?" But why did the chief look so worried when she spoke? In the chaos, Amara quietly placed her tray on a table and began to walk away. Her steps slow but steady, her head held higher than before. Tomowa wanted to chase her, to slap her again, to humiliate her further, but something in her husband's eyes stopped her. It was the first time she had ever seen fear flicker in Chief Adewale's face. Fear, not of her but of the maid. The night continued, but the joy of the wedding was gone. Guests whispered more than they danced. Tomowa forced a smile, but her hands trembled. Adewale barely touched his food, his mind elsewhere. And Amara? She disappeared from the hall, vanishing into the night like a shadow. But her words lingered in the air. "You may slap me today, but one day you will bow before me and this child." What did she mean? Who was the father of her unborn baby? Why did the billionaire look so disturbed? The answers would come soon enough. And when they did, the empire of Chief Adewale would shake to its foundation. The party eventually ended, but the whispers did not. Guests left the mansion shaking their heads, spreading gossip like wildfire across Lagos. "Did you hear the maid's words?" one senator's wife asked in her limousine. "That girl has courage," another replied. "Or madness." Meanwhile, inside the Bamadil mansion, silence replaced the drums and music. Tomowa sat in her bridal chamber, her makeup smeared, her pride wounded. Her husband, Chief Adewale, paced the room like a lion trapped in a cage. Finally she exploded. "Why didn't you defend me? Why didn't you throw that maid out immediately? You made me look weak." Adewale turned sharply, his eyes burning. "You don't understand, Tomowa," he said in a low voice. "You should not have slapped her." Tomowa froze. "What do you mean? She's a maid. A nobody. Why should I care?" But Adewale only sighed heavily, pouring himself a glass of brandy. "You don't know who she really is." Far from the glittering mansion, Amara walked barefoot along the dusty road that led back to the servants' quarters. Her cheeks still stung from the slap, but her heart felt strangely light. She entered her small room, no bigger than a storage closet, and sat on her thin mattress. She rubbed her belly and whispered softly, as if to the child inside. "Soon they will all know. You are not a mistake. You are a destiny." That night, Amara dreamt of her late mother. In the dream, her mother's voice echoed like a song. "Child, never bow to those who think they are above you. The truth in your blood will one day raise you higher than all of them." When Amara woke, tears streamed down her face. She knew the time had come. Chief Adewale had secrets. Dark ones. Many in Lagos admired him for his wealth, but very few knew the price he had paid for it. Years ago, before the jets and hotels, he had been just another struggling trader. On one desperate night, He struck a deal with an old mystic in the village of Udi. The mystic had promised him wealth beyond measure, but in return, Adewale had to sacrifice something dear to him. What he gave up that night was not money. It was blood. And that blood tied him to Amara's family in a way no one could imagine. Amara was not just a random maid. She was the daughter of Adewale's late younger brother, who had died under mysterious circumstances. When Amara's father died, Adewale had turned his back on the family, refusing to help his widowed sister-in-law. Poverty consumed them. Amara's mother eventually died of sickness, leaving the girl orphaned. Adewale thought he had buried the shame of that past. But here she was again in his mansion, carrying a child whose existence threatened to expose everything. And worse, the child was his. Months before the wedding, Adewale had noticed Amara working in the kitchen. Her quiet beauty, her resemblance to his late brother, and her innocence had stirred something forbidden in him. He had convinced himself it was only kindness when he began giving her special attention. But kindness turned into something else. One rainy evening when the household slept, he called her into his study. That night changed everything. Amara resisted at first, but Adewale's power was overwhelming. Their secret affair continued in shadows until the inevitable happened. Amara became pregnant. He had promised to take care of it, but when she refused to end the pregnancy, his fear grew. If the world discovered he had fathered a child with his maid, his niece by blood, it would ruin him. That was why her words at the wedding struck him like lightning. "You may slap me today, but one day you will bow before me and this child." She wasn't bluffing. She knew the truth. Tomowa noticed her husband's unease. The more she pressed him, the more distant he became. "Why do you look at that maid with such fear?" she demanded one night. Adewale avoided her eyes. "Forget her. She is nothing." But Tomowa's sharp mind began to piece things together. She ordered the head maid to spy on Amara, to find out everything about her pregnancy. Days later the report came. "Madam," the head maid whispered, "Amara has refused to say who the father is. But she carries herself with strange confidence. And Chief often called her to his study at night." Tomowa's blood boiled. Her wedding had been ruined. Her pride had been bruised. Now she suspected her husband's betrayal. And she vowed revenge. Weeks passed. The Bamidele Empire began to shake. Business deals failed. Contracts slipped through Adewale's hands. For the first time in years, he suffered heavy losses. He grew paranoid. Every night he drank more, muttering to himself. His eyes followed Amara everywhere. "She's cursed me," he told himself. "She carries my downfall in her womb." Meanwhile, Amara's belly grew larger. But so did her courage. She no longer walked like a servant. She walked like someone destined for more. The breaking point came during a lavish dinner at the mansion. Politicians and businessmen filled the dining hall. Tomowa sat proudly at the head of the table, determined to show strength despite her suspicions. Then, without warning, Amara entered the room. She was not carrying trays this time. She wore a simple dress, her swollen belly visible for all to see. Gasps filled the hall. Tomowa shot up. "Who allowed this girl in here?" But Amara ignored her. She walked straight to the head of the table, her eyes on Adewale. Then, in front of everyone, she placed her hand on her belly and spoke. "This child belongs to Chief Adewale Bamidele." The room exploded. Guests shouted. Phones came out. Journalists whispered furiously. Tomowa screamed. "Lies! You wicked girl! You dare insult my husband in front of me!" But when the crowd turned to Adewale, waiting for him to deny it, his silence was louder than thunder. His face was pale, his hands trembling. He could not speak. And in that silence, everyone knew the truth. The scandal hit the newspapers the very next morning. Billionaire Chief Adewale fathers child with Maid on his wedding day. The news spread across Africa, then the world. Business partners pulled out. Politicians distanced themselves. Protesters mocked him outside his mansion. But the greatest humiliation came at home. Tomowa, furious and betrayed, filed for divorce within weeks. Her family withdrew their support. The empire Adewale had built for decades crumbled overnight. And through it all, Amara remained calm. She refused interviews, refused money, refused to hide. She simply carried her pregnancy with quiet dignity. Months later, Amara gave birth to a baby boy. The child had Adewale's eyes. No one could deny it. By then, Adewale had lost almost everything. His businesses collapsed, his friends abandoned him, and his once loyal staff fled. One rainy afternoon, the once mighty billionaire walked into the small hospital where Amara had given birth. He wore no agbada, no gold, no pride. He knelt beside her bed, tears streaming down his face. "Amara," he whispered, his voice broken, "forgive me. Forgive what I did to you. Forgive the shame I brought. Please, let me see my son." And at that moment, the prophecy came true. The billionaire's wife had slapped the pregnant maid in arrogance. But now, the mighty man himself bowed before the maid and her child. Amara never returned to being a maid. With support from unexpected allies, she built a life for herself and her son. Some said she started a foundation for orphan girls. Others said she entered politics. What everyone agreed on was this: the maid who was once slapped in humiliation became a woman of power and respect. And people never forgot the words she had spoken. "You may slap me today, but one day you will bow before me and this child."